fortunately, there's a lot of people like that in our current company. And so the presentation that Steve and I are going to give is a case study of our company, Pulse Energy, and how we have implemented and adopted certain lean startup principles. So who are we? Eugene gave a brief introduction, but I'll let Steve introduce himself.
Everyone, I'm Steve. I've got a background training in engineering physics, and I've been once the Canadian national champion in paper airplane flying, and been the product manager at Pulse Energy since it was formed, basically in 2007, around there, and currently in the long-term business development and strategy role.
And so this is me. By the way, at any point during the presentation, feel free to interrupt. If you guys are users of Twitter, please feel free to tweet using either my handle or Steve's. We would love to hear your feedback as we go. So I'm on the product team. I'm involved in building the product that we're going to be talking about today, and that Steve has been instrumental in designing. So what do we do? What does Pulse Energy do as a company? So what we do is we build energy management software. Here's some information about us. We're a Vancouver-based company, founded in 2006. Not so much of a startup anymore. We now have about 60 employees. We're in the clean tech industry. So I think Brent mentioned repeatedly about clean tech as being one of the places that might be a little bit more difficult for the lean startup. I wouldn't say so, but there are definitely some challenges that we've encountered that we'll talk about. And we are a privately held company. So our focus is on commercial and institutional buildings, understanding how they operate, monitoring their energy consumption. What we do is we integrate with real-time metering systems, so smart meters. We aggregate their data, pull it into our data center, and we run various types of analytics on that data, and we make that information available to people like energy managers and facility managers to optimize the operation of their buildings. So using our system, they can determine how much energy they're saving as a product of, let's say, retrofit actions or activities, energy savings, or conservation activities that they're conducting in their buildings, and so they can measure and verify the savings. What we're also involved with doing is helping them identify anomalies. So when their building is behaving in an atypical fashion, they can use the real-time information that we provide, the analytics that we provide, the alerting that we provide, to help them see where their problems are, where they can focus on adjusting their building's operations in order to save energy. Another key focus for us is not just internally with energy managers, but also helping engage people like you who may live or work in a building, helping you understand how your building is consuming energy, what sort of steps you can take to conserve energy, what the impact is of your actions on your building's energy use, and get you involved in energy savings campaigns. And then it can also be used as like a green marketing piece, so you can present to the general public, okay, our building is LEED certified, we have this level of consumption as a product of these conservation measures, this is what we're achieving. Our objective is to address what we see as being one of the most serious problems facing humanity, the crisis of global climate change. A third of all energy consumed in North America goes to heating, lighting, cooling, ventilating buildings. That's a big chunk of our overall carbon footprint. So if by helping buildings operate more efficiently, we can lessen that footprint, then we consider that we've done a good job. And so we measure not just electricity, but also natural gas consumption, steam consumption, water consumption, pretty much any type of consumption or generation that happens inside of these types of buildings. And our objective is to also walk the talk. So we're not just helping out our clients, we're attempting to apply the ideas and technologies within our own building and our partners' buildings. So our presentation is broken up into two sections. Steve's going to talk about customer development. I'm going to talk about the solutions development side of things. So I'll pass it over to Steve.
All right, thanks, Owen. So first, a bit of a disclaimer. What follows is, it's messy. There's some great examples. If you go to Eric Reese's blog and you look at one of his recent posts of one of the lean startup events they had, I think Brent and Patrick were actually judging these things, and there's a set of slideshows from these companies that kind of come together very small number of people. They're following all of the great principles in the books by the authors that presented today. And it's very clean, lean startups in a solid environment. They're able to execute it very cleanly, and it's very nice. We're operating in a much bigger company, and it's not as nice as that, but I hope that the lessons we've learned might help you apply it in a slightly larger environment. So just as a show of hands, who's working at a company of 30 people or more? All right, excellent. So maybe some of these things will help you do that. If you can't do if you can't convert your existing company to be, use all the lean startup methods from start to beginning, at least you can inject some and get some advantages that way. A bit more context around that. So some of the typical lean startups we've been hearing about are B2C, software product, web-based, fairly small dollars per account. The deal length is days or even shorter to sign them up, and the company size is quite small. We're B2B. Our deployments require both software and hardware in the buildings to monitor the energy. The deal sizes are quite large, sometimes 6, even leading to 7 figures each. So it's a longer sales cycle, and we're about 60 people. That said, there's always a way. I'm very enthusiastic about these principles. I'm confident that you can apply them in large companies and well-established teams. You can start to use them and start to see the advantage. So starting off, I was quite skeptical. And maybe just a show of hands. I mean, are there any skeptics in the audience after hearing the full day about the lean startup methods? All right, a few great people. But yeah, certainly in 2009, Owen brought Eric Rees to our office, and he was talking about all this great stuff, very excited. It sounded good, but I kind of said, you know what? Eric is working on this online dating chat type thing, and we're trying to work with business customers. I don't know if we can do this fast. Sometimes we're participating very often in requests for proposal responses where it takes months, and it's a very drawn-out process. And how are we going to use these things to iterate quickly enough in a business environment? Fortunately, there are ways to do it. We've discovered some of those. Just around the RFPs in particular, if you're in a business where your customers have to put out RFPs before they buy your stuff, if you're responding to an RFP and you haven't already talked to the customer, probably it's too late, or it's going to be a challenge for you at least. The reason they put out the RFPs is because they've already talked to a bunch of people and they've got a problem and they're excited about buying something. It's kind of a necessary step along the way. So there's a lot of good opportunities to do customer development with these big, slow organizations and just work around their procurement processes. One of the exciting things about business customers, so the procurement process and the long deal cycles is a downside. The flip side is they'll often pay you to do that whole interview discovery process. When I joined the company, I was a little unsure at first. The CEO and founder, he said, we want to start this company, this is what we're going to do. It was only 2 guys at that time. I was a little unsure, but he said, you know what? We're going to do these energy audits for our customers. So we don't have a product yet, but these people are going to pay us thousands of dollars to go into their buildings and really discover what their problems are and then propose a solution. Okay, that's great. That way we can verify that this is actually a problem and there's a reasonable solution. And we're not going to lose money in the process. At the same time, if they're paying you to do that, of course, they've got a vested interest in making sure they're providing everything you need to get the answers. So you might be lucky to sit down with someone and spend an hour of their time. If they're just doing it to you as a favor, it's kind of an interview. But if they've paid you $1,000 and you say, I need 5 hours of your time to make sure I get the most out of this $1,000 that you're paying me for this report, they're a lot more willing to give you that time. And you can really really go into that organization and turn it upside down and find what you need. The other good thing about business customers for some of the lean startup methods is they're a captive audience. They're paid to be there from 9 to 5, and you don't have to necessarily be that much more interesting to get their attention. If you're working with consumers, instead of spending time with you, they're going to be watching a hockey game or going for a hike or doing something that's quite fun. We've also found through design research sessions that we can actually, in the process of doing this customer discovery and the customer development, we can actually add a lot of value to them just by putting the different players from a large enterprise in a room and having a session, facilitating a session where they're discovering what their problems are as an organization together. Another one of the tips, and it was mentioned in the past one, but use students. If you're having a hard time getting information through your customer development, maybe people think that maybe they're holding their cards close to their chest because they actually like you a lot and they want to buy from you one day, so they don't want to give away any information about what their budget might be. Maybe they've got a good relationship with one of your competitors, and so they don't want to help you because that'll ultimately hurt the competitor, which will hurt them. But we've found that students, people basically say anything to students, they're happy to help them. And you can just go to your local university, go to the MBA department, and just say, I've got a kind of a business research project. They'll set you up with a group of keen students, and you get a lot of good information. We've had recorded interviews, 45 minutes long, very rich information. In the other case, all of the companies, and we're not doing anything unethical. It's clear if they ask who the students are doing the project for. But companies will very openly say who they've bought from in the past and what their budgets are at. And finally, around this part, the business customers are often a real pain to sign up through the whole procurement process and the sales cycle. But once you get them, the business users really are great to work with. You can phone them up 9 to 5. You can put them through, once you get your funnel, that first stage of acquiring them can be very long, but then maybe you have an additional feature set that you're trying out. You want to see, are people actually interested in using this? And you can run your existing users through those funnels very, very quickly and efficiently. And that's something we've done with the competitions functionality, where we wanted to run energy competitions. So it was something new we were adding to the product. Rather than going out to the market and seeing how long that will take, because that process is ongoing and it's going to take months because of the sales cycles, we're able to very, very quickly within our existing user base and see how many of our existing users would be interested in this extra feature. The second area is around contracts. In a business environment, you often have to sign contracts, and sometimes there'll be requirements in the contracts. One of the things we've discovered is, those requirements, they're often not used. They're often something, someone thought that they needed something before actually using your software, unless they're a mind reader, they can see into the future that they're not going to be right. So just set it up so that those features can die in the future, because they often will. So put it off in a portion of the software where not everybody's going to see it. Maybe only enable it for that one customer that's requested it. And if it does pick up and get used, that's great. But otherwise, it's just kind of a fact of doing business. The flip side, the other side of contracts, is if you can make them a little bit fuzzy, it sounds risky, it goes against everything that you're told to do. It can actually allow you to do some good customer development. So the case study here is someone's come to you and they've said, the salesperson has basically managed to sell your solution to someone. Maybe it's $100,000. They sign the check, you get the check, but in the contract it says you have to do some additional things in the next 12 months as a part of this contract. Now you might think you're at the end here, you're ready to cross the chasm, you've got your market fit, all of that. Realistically, all you've found is the problem. All they're saying to you is, we believe you understand the problem, and we believe that you will follow through on delivering a solution. But they're not even saying that you found the solution, because they're saying you need to do additional things to get there. Now, the legal departments in your company and the other company are going to say this wording has to be very tight, otherwise there's a risk that we're going to disagree down the road. But in order to make the wording very tight, that means that both sides have to agree to the exact solution to the problem today. And it's impossible to do. That's what this whole process is about, iterating, working with them closely, discovering what the exact problem is, going through the agile development process to figure out what the solution is. So if you can fight that, and if you can try and make the contracts fuzzy, fully acknowledging that you're probably going to do more development work as a result, but you're going to develop stuff that's useful. That's a technique that we've found pretty helpful. The next area is roadmaps. So I was in the product management position, and maybe I've missed a chapter in one of the books, but I've yet to find a good answer for how exactly to do roadmaps using lean startup methodologies. You don't want to give your sales team a roadmap that says this is exactly what we're doing for the next 18 months, because then they'll sell that to customers. And the truth is, you need the flexibility to pivot, and you need that flexibility. On the other hand, so what I did for a while is we basically didn't have a roadmap except 3 weeks out, because that's all we needed to do to keep the dev team working efficiently. But you need the roadmap to communicate that vision. You want to communicate to your customers, listen, we've got ambition, we're going somewhere big, and just put that disclaimer on it. So that's something that we've found effective as well. I don't think being a lean startup means that you don't need a roadmap. You need to show people that you want to go somewhere big, and they'll understand that direction might change in the future. The other challenge that we come into with this is we're working with not very many deals. You might be in a business-to-business company where it's a great month if you only sell to one customer. If it's a 7-figure deal, that makes it hard to do A/B testing when you only have one customer. So sometimes what you need to do is you need to hold back on some things, some new feature sets, and let that latent demand build up. We did that with the competitions as well. There was one person that really wanted it. We were interested in going down that road, but we said, you're going to have to wait with us for 10 months. 10 months later, we had 3 or 4 or 5 people that wanted it, and we were able to go through the process properly and discover, get a lot more value out of it. Now this one is a product development perspective. If you're larger than, if you've got a product manager and you're working with a product development team, and they hold themselves to a high standard of quality, you may have a hard time with the MVP because you're going to make it as small as possible and communicate, listen, this is a very small thing, we just want to get the very basics out there. For your development team, they're holding themselves to a high standard. It's just human nature. They're probably going to overbuild it. They're going to make it better than it needs to be to do the test. One thing I've found that works is you can put a time box on it to say this is the scope, and there's only a week. It's got to be done at the end of the week, and then if they come back and it is not of a high enough quality, as it was alluded to in the last session, then you can extend the period. So that's one way to resolve some of the tension with the developers kind of always wanting to make it to their standard of quality, but you needing to have it quickly to go through the iterations. And I'm going to go through some of these pretty quickly because we are trying to fit this into the schedule. But the other one I would say, if you are in a larger company, you're more likely to have customer support people or a professional services group. Use those people as a part of your process. It's call them customer success is something we've found that works because that's what they're doing for you in that role. They're not just responding to people picking up the phone. They're not just picking up the phone when a customer phones to complain about something. Their job is to take something that has gone through our process and that we've assumed the customers want when we got to the MVP stage. Their job is to then go out with the customers, make sure that the customer achieves success with it, and put together a successful case study, and then we know that we're done with that. Experiments. So experiments are an important part of all of this. One of our most successful experiments, in respect of the fact that we learned a lot from it, is we set up a system where anyone could sign up for a basic version of our software for free or get some basic benchmarking done for us for free. It allowed us to eliminate some of the questions that we had about pricing and deployment models and channels and marketing, and really narrow down on a few questions around messaging and value prop. Where we failed with this is we fell into the trap of assuming that this thing was going to go so well that 1,000 people were going to sign up on the first day. So we took too much time when we kind of built the whole thing in the back. Of course, when we sent it out, we learned that the messaging wasn't quite right, so 2 people signed up. And we could have easily handled those signups manually. Instead, we had this whole back-end system prepared to do a lot of volume. And so that's one of the things that we found. You need to take some risk that your experiment's going to be wildly successful and you might not be able to meet the demand, rather than taking risk on the other side and assuming, spending a lot more time doing it, because that extends the number of cycles you can get in, and or it extends the cycle length, and it means you can't learn nearly as much. Pivots. Couldn't do a presentation on Lean Startup without talking about a pivot. One of the major pivots we had is we thought that we were going to sell to facility managers. And certainly in talking to them, this seemed very good. In retrospect, the facility managers we were talking to were the visionaries. They were early adopters. They were super keen. They loved what we were doing. once we actually built the MVP and got it in front of the facility managers, it turns out they had all sorts of objections that we couldn't even imagine around not wanting, 100 good alarms with one bad false alarm is worse than nothing at all. So there were some issues there, and we pivoted to focusing on energy managers, which required changing the way we sell and what's in the product as well. And pivoting isn't fun at first because it means you've got to stand up and say, I screwed up. Wherever position you are in the company, and say, I screwed up, we spent some effort in an area that wasn't going to work. But obviously, once the new direction goes well, it's a good thing to do. Last two now, segmentation. If you're segmenting your market and it takes you less than a day and you don't need to talk to any customers or anyone to do it, you've probably done it wrong. There's a lot of really subtle things in segmentation. This isn't even a segmentation of our market. This is just our competitors and partners, or potential partners. There's really a lot of different dimensions to doing it. So I just wanted to raise it because it's one thing that I've seen done wrong, where people pretty quickly just say, well, we'll do it by vertical or simply geography, but it's often a lot more subtle than that. And finally, in terms of what's next, what we're doing as an organization. One thing in a big organization that we're doing is just explicitly trying to identify the assumptions that we want to test on a monthly basis, so that the sales team and marketing teams and professional services group know in our business model, this is one assumption we've made that's important, that we're unsure about. And in the next month, we really want to make sure by the end of the month we know what the answer to this is. And if you're in a big organization and you're trying to bring in some of this customer development, one thing that might work is using the business model canvas or the lean model canvas as your objective. So for my performance reviews, I've asked my boss, the CEO, I've said, I want you to judge me on whether or not I finished this number of business model canvases with properly validated assumptions. So at the end of the quarter, that's all I'm judged on. Have I done that? And that might be an interesting way for you to bring it into your organization. With that, I'll pass it over to Owen.
So the second half of the presentation is about some of the technical practices that we use. So I think that there are a number of technical people in the audience, engineers, etc. So this section is for you. With the presentation that Rishi did this morning, he talked about the 4 quadrants. For our company right now, I would say we're in the lower left-hand corner. So the untested market hypothesis, untested product. Which means that our core focus is around the build, measure, learn loop. And nobody's put up a slide showing some of the practices that Eric Reese has enumerated in the Lean Startup. But I'm going to go through some of those and talk about our implementation of them. But specifically, our focus is on what sort of practices we can use to help us build faster, measure faster, and learn faster. So starting with build faster, we release new versions of the software every week. And that is kind of a core part of our overall process. That means that we release on average about 75 times a year. Our release process is of course fully automated, and it's done with zero downtime. So every time we release a new version of the software, it's not at all visible to our customers. It's not at all like upgrading your operating system. It's something that happens transparently in the background. We don't do continuous deployment. So I know this. It's a practice as part of Lean Startup. It's something that we have the capability to do. We choose not to do. There are certain technical restrictions. One of the parts of our product is that we do quite a bit of comprehensive analytics, background processing. Every time we do a deployment, those types of things are interrupted. I know from talking with Eric Reese at InView, even with their continuous deployment process, there are only parts of their system that were deployed continuously. So some things like database migration, certain backend processing, they were deployed potentially on a less frequent basis. So we don't, at this point in time, do continuous deployment. We do pretty much continuous deployment to test. So our deployment to our test environment, we do that about 10 to 20 times per day. Again, automated the same way as our deployments are automated in production. Also zero downtime, so people using the test environment to validate the latest functionality are not at all affected when new versions of the software go out. And this allows us to have a very tight feedback loop between development and testing, and we can continuously verify new functionality as it's getting built. At the heart of that is we use a continuous integration server called TeamCity. The build process is all done on that. Is all done through that. So there's one click deploy to the test environment through the build server that builds up to the latest version of the application, runs all the tests, runs static analysis, makes that ready as a deployable unit. That deployable unit can be deployed in the test environment or deployed in the production environment. Yes, we do DevOps. So for those people who are familiar with or haven't heard of DevOps, DevOps just means that developers and operations people either work closely together or those roles are shared by one person. In our case, we don't have anybody dedicated to operations. Developers take responsibility for provisioning our production environment, supporting our application running in production, doing all of the monitoring, etc. And what that allows is it means that there are fewer organizational hurdles associated with making deployments. I mean, it's essentially the same team that's building the software is the same team that makes the deployments, the same team that's focused on keeping those environments stable. So here's what our release cycle looks like. So as I said, it's a weekly release. We typically release on Wednesdays. So Thursdays, we kick things off with a planning meeting and a retrospective. Friday mornings, we do a full company demo of the latest functionality that's been delivered. So, we have 60 people. We're all in one office. We're spread across 2 floors. We can go up to a shared area and on a big screen monitor, walk people from the company through whatever features the product team wants to highlight. It's a great opportunity for us to solicit and get feedback and communicate out what's been changing within the software. In terms of the rest of the week, it's your standard development activities that are happening. We have a cutoff on Tuesday night. Wednesdays we dedicate to release testing. So one thing that Eric Rees talks about that they have at InView and is part of the Lean Startup practice is this notion of a cluster immune system. We don't have anything that complex. I don't know that it's needed, but we do dedicate time. We do dedicate time towards doing manual regression testing before we release new versions of the software. And I want to highlight that because I think a lot of companies perceive this as being an obstacle to releasing software more frequently. Say, oh no, we can't release software so frequently because we don't have this massive battery of automated tests. And I don't think that's necessary. I mean, I think you can build that up as you go. As we do have a suite of automated regression tests that we are running continuously, but it does not supplement, or it supplements but does not replace the manual testing that goes along with each release going out to customers. We have, one thing that we do have is that I think is really the heartbeat for the team is there's a monitor in the product team area that we call the status board that shows all pertinent information for the team that's involved in building the product. So there's a few things we keep an eye on. Obviously, the status of the build. Another is what the status is of the queues in our issue tracker. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Production and test environment metrics. So, just some insight into what's happening. This is the kind of thing that you can throw together in a couple of hours using jQuery, which is one of the things we've done. Just scrape information from different systems, put it in a common place, simple web page. Something that's easy for the team to go in and customize. What we find is there's something new that we want to focus on, something new that we want to understand. It takes a couple of hours. Somebody can write that, pull it into the status board, and then it's visible to everybody on the team. So at the heart of our release management process is focusing on queues. So we look at the number of issues that are assigned in a release, how many are in each stage in a process. Our focus is if they've been scheduled for the release but haven't been started, how many are started, how many are waiting for verification in the test environment, how many are ready to go. Our criteria for deciding whether we release or not is we have to have 5 or fewer issues in the unresolved state prior to on the day before the release. So on the day before regression testing is to start. And so that's our go, no-go decision. Now, if we are unable to meet that release target because of the frequency with which you release, it's not a big deal. We can normally defer. We can at this point in time release any time, so we can defer the release by a day. If there's something urgent that a customer is waiting for a specific date, then we can always make a patch. But that doesn't happen so often. We have a few roles within the team that are distinct to our team, but I thought I would share. So we have the role of the harvester. The harvester is responsible for monitoring the new issue queue. So anytime issues have been discovered or raised might be raised by customers, might be raised by the customer success team that Stephen's talking about, could be raised by anybody on the team, they're doing tactical triage. So they're looking at, is there capacity within the context of this weekly release? If so, then they'll schedule it in, they may bump something else out, or they may schedule it for a future release. So their responsibility is just to keep the queues at a reasonable level. So we practice, I wouldn't say a very rigorous version of Kanban, but the notion is to keep the queue sizes down to a reasonable size. And so the harvester is instrumental in doing that. The shepherd is responsible for shepherding the release. So they're responsible for organizing all the activities that are associated with the release, making sure that everybody is happy with the level of testing that's done, and then the release goes out. So as part of releasing software on a regular basis, we have some, we built up a little bit of a ritual around it. And so part of our ritual is we have 2 mascots. We've also got a bit of a pastoral theme happening. I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but we have the Ship-It Sheep and the Release Llama. The Release Llama is well-traveled. It's been to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. It's been to Mexico and a number of other places. So, but one thing that I want to highlight here is the release is really, it's a key part of our culture, and you see that reflected in some of the rituals that go around it. Like many other companies that are releasing software on this type of basis, primary development is all done in trunk. If there are patches that need to go out, we cut a branch release and make the changes there, and then deploy the patch from the branch. Deploying patch releases is automated in the same way, same process as a regular deployment, and rollbacks are also automated. So another part of Lean Startup in terms of building stuff faster is being able to exercise leverage. For us, as I think a number of other people in the room have tested, we leverage open source extensively. I really can't think of anything that's in our stack that is proprietary. I meant to list some of the technologies, but didn't have time. Similarly, we also leverage a number of third-party web services. So these are not open source, but these are things that we pay for. But the key idea is anything that is orthogonal to our core business domain or core area of expertise, we look for third parties to provide services around. So whether it's hosting services or data management or monitoring, email, spam filtering, etc. Like the more third-party services that we can throw out that satisfy our needs, the fewer things that we need to build, and the more that we can focus our efforts on our core product. We use a combination of managed hosting and cloud services. So some parts of our application live on EC2, some are on S3, and some parts of our system are on dedicated iron at rack space. We found that to be a good model because we got much better reliability and performance out of the dedicated servers. But for things where we need just-in-time scalability or things where we can tolerate lower levels of reliability, we have the option of running them in the cloud. And a key part of the facilitating that is having some sort of an automated infrastructure configuration tool set. We use both Puppet and Chef. We started out with Puppet. How many people use something like Puppet or Chef? Okay, how many people are familiar with them? Okay. Essentially what it allows you to do is script out your infrastructure, the build of your infrastructure. So you can create an image from a script, and it's essential that if you're deploying into a cloud environment, because you need to be able to stand up new instances, get them configured within a short period of time so they're up and running your software from some sort of a base image. So that's key, and that allows you, again, to build and release software very, very quickly. Okay, so that's it on the build faster side. Let's move on to measure faster. So our core focus, especially with releasing software on this type of basis, is responsiveness. So we accept that we're not going to catch everything in the testing time that we have available, or with the automated suite of tests that we have available. And that's certainly, if we were in a continuous deployment environment, it would be even more so. But more often than not, what you can do is, if you're not in kind of a life-critical software environment, is you have a higher tolerance for errors, as long as you know when those errors occur, and can respond quickly to them when they happen. So our key focus is, we want to know when our customers encounter an error, and we can respond directly to that customer. We can deploy a patch to fix the problem as quickly as possible. So to support that, we use a number of, again, third-party tools to let us know when there are problems. They might be problems within the system, the infrastructure. They might be problems within the application. So we have monitoring services set up at various levels. And I'm happy to talk about any of these in more detail after. Logmaster is the only one that you won't find anywhere on the internet, in all likelihood. It's a tool that we built in-house. It essentially listens to stream log data on a socket and sees if there's any errors or warnings, and sends us an email. I've worked on so many systems in the past where logging was just done to file, and nobody ever looked at those log files unless there was some sort of a catastrophic problem in the system. Whereas for this, as soon as there's a problem, we know about it right away. And there's a real incentive to deal with any sorts of problems in the system, because you just keep getting emails about it. So it's just an ongoing part of cleaning the system, is keeping the logs clean, correcting any sorts of small problems that users may encounter. So as part of our DevOps role, we have a daily support rotation. So there's a calendar that's set up. We block it out 2 weeks at a time. People sign up for a given day. At this point in time, we don't have to do 24/7 hardware support. We do carry a support pager, so if there's anything serious that happens in the data center, then whoever's on support duty will respond to it. But in general, it means like checking your email before you go to bed and when you get up in the morning. And you're just the first point of contact if there are any sort of issues that need to be dealt with. At this point in time, I mean, things run very smoothly. So, with barring like what happened with EC2 last week, where it was really kind of out of our hands. I don't know how many people saw that there was a big, how many people were affected by that? Yeah, we seem to be like one of the last ones to come back online afterwards. It was kind of frustrating. But again, underscoring like having this balance between dedicated hardware and cloud services gives you some flexibility. I mean, we didn't suffer a significant outage because the things that were running on our cloud servers, we were able to move to other environments. So part of measurement is understanding your users and how your users are using the software. This is an area where there's a tremendous amount of innovation that's happening in the broader community. I know Rob and Ash provided great examples of some of the stuff they're doing. It's an area that we can improve a lot. But just in a nutshell, what we do, we use Google Analytics for doing user tracking, pretty standard, very easy. Played around with mixed panel metrics. The hard thing is designing the right metrics and then paying attention to them. And then we also, for some of the key metrics that are not tied to like directly to users or whatever, that are specific to our domain, we build stuff internally to track that, and that's visible through the application. Also, as part of the development of new features, we define success criteria, and those success criteria are based in value delivered to users. So using the startup metrics or pirates, specifically for us focused around activation and retention, with us being a SaaS model and it be in the B2B space, we're interested in how frequently are people using different features, which users are using those features, how frequently are they using them, how can we convert more people to using them, because our perspective is the more functionality that people use on a regular basis within our software, the more likely they are to renew. So that's our model at least, and so we assess that for each feature that we build. Okay, so the third section, learning faster. The problem is unknown, the solution is unknown. So this is something that's been mentioned in a number of the previous presentations. So our approach to dealing with that is we want to be able to. We're still trying to figure out, what functionality, what features are really going to capture and meet the needs of energy managers. So our approach is that we'll build very small, simple things, small features. So essentially these little MVPs, lots of them, put them in front of customers. We might vet it early in terms of wireframes, but plant many seeds and then see what grows. So the things that we see there is an uptake within our existing user community, we'll invest more in. Those things that don't do as well, we end up culling. One thing that's instrumental to making this happen is having the ability to incrementally roll features out. So when we release a new feature, it doesn't go live to all users. So initially, our rollout typically goes, we roll things out by user role and then by customer. So it might be visible just to super users, and then we'll roll it out to specific customers that have requested a feature that we're working with on designing that feature. And then we roll it out more broadly, and I'll go through that process in more detail in a second. Ash talked about this as being feature flippers, but there's essentially just functionality in the software that allows you to toggle features on and off on a per customer basis. So with that in mind, one of the things that we focus on is understanding what's the life cycle of a feature. The life cycle of a feature does not end at the point in time it's deployed into production. In fact, that's just the start. So what we consider is features will go through an alpha, beta, and a GA process. So alpha, our focus is we have a specific need, a specific pain that we're working on addressing, and we will release that internally. So within our company, we have a professional services group. They are dealing with customers on a continuous basis, and they're the guinea pigs. They're the crash test dummies for a lot of this stuff. And that means when we designate a feature as being alpha, it can be very rudimentary, the quality can be low, there doesn't have to be a lot of UX behind it, it can have bugs associated with it. Their focus is how quickly can you get me something that will get this information for a specific client, or that will facilitate this particular action that I'm trying to achieve. So it can be done very cheaply, and we use that as a way to vet, okay, then has that need been met? Do other people have that need? And if they do, then we may choose to move it on into a beta phase. So as part of beta, we identify, okay, who has latent demand for this functionality? Can we bring them on board as what we call design partners? So we build a customer advisory board around a specific set of features. These customers have agreed to essentially help us design this new functionality, and as a product of that participation, then their needs will be met through the product. And so at that stage, we will roll these features out to those customers, and they'll have the opportunity to play with it. And on the basis of that, if we decide that everything's gone well, then we may choose to release that to everyone. Now, the key thing here is that the cost associated with the investment in that feature set rises exponentially as it moves through the process. So by the time it gets to GA, what's associated with GA is normally quite a bit more expensive. It means that there needs to be quite a bit of UX around it. We have help documentation. There needs to be some sort of workflow, feature discovery, which I'll talk about in a second. There needs to be some way for users to know about it. We'll have some sort of a launch, etc. So, that's the life cycle that we work with. I don't know if Ash is in here right now. He gave a presentation at the Lean Startup Conference and showed a workflow that was somewhat similar to this. So it seems like a number of companies are starting to adopt a similar process with rolling out features, especially in the SaaS model. So one thing that, because we release software so frequently, we separate releasing and launching. So a launch for us is something that happens once a quarter. There's some marketing effort. We'll target a specific conference, and we'll try and make a splash about a new set of features. The key thing is those features have been built. Those features have been living in the system for potentially a couple of months. We've had some opportunity to vet them with some of our customers, with our design partners. So we have a pretty high degree of confidence in what it is that we're going to launch. So this is in contrast to the kind of a traditional model, which attempts to marry the launch and the release together, where there's a lot of activity and expectation associated with the release. Everything goes out, and then the problems start coming in. And there's also a lot of pressure on trying to meet those deadlines. For us, with having frequent releases, we're able to decouple those two events. And so the marketing efforts are based on typically what we built. It may not have been exposed to everybody, but we have a high degree of confidence in terms of what's included. So one thing we focus on is keeping the product team, developers, testers, etc., highly connected with users, and that's typically done through design, working together with design partners and iterating on features. There's a quote from Eric Ries that he said when he was last here in Vancouver. How many people went and saw Eric Ries at the VCTIA event? So do you remember this quote? Because this quote made an impact on me, because I see this a lot with teams that I've worked with. So if you don't know your users, you don't know what quality is. And I've seen that time and again. Especially one thing we've done is when we started out, we hired people straight out of university as testers. So they didn't have a background in software testing. And if you observe their activity, they were interested in, let me understand the problem domain. Let me understand what users are trying to achieve here. And they would test from that perspective. And we hired some experienced testers. And the experienced testers bring a toolkit of typical testing techniques with them, which are very valuable. But what we found was they start finding problems that we kind of knew about, but we were never very concerned about because users just weren't really encountering. And their process of testing was from a testing perspective and was very different than testing from a user's perspective, because they weren't attempting to achieve goals for using the software, they're attempting to find bugs. And it's the same thing for developers. So trying to bring that sort of alignment where the product team understands the goals that users are trying to achieve through the software, and then testing to verify that those goals are met are instrumental, I think, in improving quality. 5 Whys. 5 Whys is part of, it's been mentioned in previous presentations, is something that we also do. It's a lightweight form of root cause analysis. We use it anytime there are, we use it more on the system side of things, so if there's any types of serious problems in our production environment, we conduct a simple 5 Whys exercise to get to the bottom of what's happening, and then we turn those into things that we will tackle in order to prevent these types of problems from recurring. Usability testing. This was mentioned. Ash gave a shout out to Steve Kurtz's book. We try and follow both of these. We do a very lightweight form of usability testing almost by default. As a part of our new employee induction, they get a crash course in understanding our product. and we use that as an opportunity to do usability tests. And it's always very insightful and painful. And the idea is that anybody on the product team can participate or should be the driver in these types of events. We do it typically without having all like the setup of a usability lab, etc. It's normally just kind of pairing and observing them struggle to use the software, but it is really insightful. Weekly demonstrations I mentioned earlier as part of our release process. One thing for companies how many companies release software every week or less? So one challenge, I don't know if you guys find this as well, but releasing software and features so frequently, it introduces a certain communication problem. How do you communicate out what has changed within the software? Even for us, our focus right now is primarily internally, like to our customer success team. How do they know about what enhancements are there? Yes, we do the weekly demos. We also do release notes. We realized very quickly, like people don't pay attention to release notes in general, even if they're getting software once a quarter. But if they're getting new versions of software every week, then they really don't pay attention to release notes. So we've experimented with a variety of different approaches to trying to get people more engaged in the release note process. A key thing we learned, and this was kind of through customer development, through interviewing people internally, like what is it about release notes that you find is boring? What would make you more interested in release notes? So key thing is, they want to know how does this affect me? I mean, that's what everybody cares about, right? How is my job affected by this? So the release notes is targeted to, the set of features is broken up by department or by customer, and so we describe what's changed in the release for that customer, or what's new for marketing, what's new for sales. We also test people's engagement in the release note process. So one of the things that we do is we do a weekly survey in our release notes. And part of the survey we have, we found that like if you click on a link in an email that takes you to a survey, the people typically don't click on the link, but if the survey is embedded in the email, then they're much more inclined to click on it. So I was looking for a lightweight solution for doing in-email surveys. And what we ended up doing is just using bit.ly links. So at least you can tell how many people have clicked on a specific option, and just put those links directly in the email. And then the links will link through to some kind of a fun, we basically have a website of the week. So you get a prize if you complete the survey. And the prize is, you find out about we have some memes within the product team, and so we typically use that as an opportunity to expose those memes to the rest of the company. Anybody play QWOP? QWOP? Yeah, so that was one of ours.
Awesome.
Yeah. So those kinds of things. It's just kind of fun stuff that you can do internally. Okay, so another challenge associated with releasing software this frequently is how do customers find out about new features? This for us is key when we take a feature into GA. We want to have some sort of mechanism that will expose that feature to users. I don't know how many people saw the Flickr Panda, but Flickr went through a site redesign, and they created a pretty cool feature discovery mechanism where it was a workflow, steps 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I think the fourth step was this like panda popped out of the corner of the screen to greet you. So we don't go to that extent. But the idea is like if you've added some new functionality within the software, how do users find it? For us, we use a very lightweight mechanism. We just have a flash bar on the top of the screen that we use typically for communicating alerts or results of user actions, and so we can send a flash message out to all our users or a subset of our users to alert them of new functionality. Killing features. So another benefit of operating in this type of cycle is that it makes it easy to pull things out of the software. So we assess on a feature-by-feature basis how much use are they getting. If they're not getting a lot, then we will remove them and see if anybody screams. And if they scream, then we can bring them back in again. Normally that consists of hiding a link, and then we weeks, if nobody screams, then the functionality will actually get ripped out of the software. It's normally a pretty easy process. More often than not, we find rather than killing features, we are replacing features with something new. So that way, users, Rishi talked about like the costs associated with pulling features out and how people feel like something is taken away from them, and that is a big concern. Part of the way that we address that is we say, well, we're not taking this away, we're replacing it with something better. And so then there's a migration process where our customer success team will work with those customers and they'll transition from an old feature to a new feature. And that way they can recognize whether or not it's better. And I think this is now pretty standard. I mean, you see this with like when Facebook rolls out a new site design, or when Gmail rolls out a set of new features, they try and entice people to move over, but you can always move back if you want. And that, I think, engenders a lot of trust. And then you also get, it's a form of split testing. Right? You can see how many people really do prefer what you think is a better way of enabling certain functionality. So one of the challenges that we find, and Brant talked about this a little bit in his presentation, Brant and Patrick, is balancing sustainment and innovation. So on the one hand, we've got our existing customer base, and it's very easy to continue to work with them, roll out new functionality and features. On the other hand, there are new markets that we're going after. And so how do you balance those kind of sustainment activities with the innovation activities? We've tried to focus our team structure on having teams that own areas of the application, so they build deep domain knowledge and may have relationships with specific customers, etc. So balancing, like generating some of the innovation. One practice that we have is Big Idea Day. It's kind of like Google 20% time, but we do one day a month, where the product team is free to work on whatever they want. So that might be exploring specific technology, that might be scratching a particular itch that you don't see being prioritized by product management. It may be, somebody's bribed you to build something, and you help them out. So some of the stuff what we've always been astounded by what's come out of Big Idea Day. The only criteria with Big Idea Day is you need to have something to demo at the end of the day or the start of the next day. So we had a mobile version of our application written in a day. And part of this is also, like Steve talked before about latent demand. Sometimes if you wait long enough with features and there's enough ideas that are happening within the product team that by the time, once they're in a position where they're empowered to build something, they've already figured a lot of it out and it can go quite quickly. Whereas if the idea for a feature has come from product management, then there's often like a lot of learning and discovery that's done by the team, and it seems like it takes a lot longer. So mobile version of the application, or building a new login page. Our login page used to be very simple. This was something that nobody would really prioritize because once you've logged in, you very rarely come back to this page. Or some other functionality in the software. So that's it. So here's just a list of some of the things that I mentioned, how they relate to the different categories in terms of building faster, measuring faster, and learning faster. Any questions about our case study, some of the stuff we're doing? Please.
How do you manage in your learning faster? How do you manage and then do a retrospective over a year of what you learned and what made you learn faster?
I don't have a good answer for that.
Do you use a wiki and keep track of it? Do you use a wiki?
So we did for a while. We haven't recently, for the most part. So we do a retrospective after each release. We talk about what happened in the last release and things we want to try for the next release. And for a while we captured it on the wiki. Now it's just on the whiteboard. It gets erased every week. So there's definitely the opportunity to capture that.
So you're missing a sense of history that's going under the door now.
That's assuming that we would actually go back and look at it again, yes, but it's something that we could do more of. Other questions? Yeah.
What are examples of feature success criteria that you've relied on?
Feature success criteria. So, so the feature success criteria are typically based on gates for moving features between the alpha, beta, and GA phases. So it would mean having, so Steve talked about the competitions functionality. So what we did for competitions was our initial goal was just, can we run a competition? And we wanted to vet this ourselves internally. So we ran a competition in our building. So we were the primary users of our software. We were the ones who looked at it. We wanted to know, can we save energy by using our software to engage people? And so we vetted that worked. Okay, then we started working with our. So that was our success criteria for getting out of the alpha phase. So for the beta phase, we said we want to run this with 3 partners before we look at rolling this out more broadly. So we had this latent pool of customers that were interested in this functionality. So we got them set up. We worked with them to run competitions themselves. We solicited their feedback based on what we built for the alpha phase, and refined it, incorporated their suggestions, and then once we moved through that, we said, okay, it's good. We've actually decided to leave that feature in beta because it's not something. While it's something that people want, it's not necessarily something that people want to pay for, and the cost associated with taking it through to GA, where some of the workflows associated with configuration of a competition would be truly intuitive to users. Like, we've opted not to take it to that next stage. But that would be an example. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay. Others? Yeah.
So 2 questions. First one is, how do you deal with features that take more than 1 week to build?
Okay, sure. So features that we have lots of those. Those features are still getting released every week. They're just not directly exposed to users. They are accessible within the software, so it might be that the links are not visible, the pages are secure, but that's the general approach. So that gives us the ability to demo it. Sometimes our sales team will, if they see a feature that's under development in a weekly, as part of the weekly demo, they'll choose to go and showcase it to a customer. If the customer is interested in that, just to give them a sense of where we're going, and also to take an opportunity to collect feedback. But those features are generally living in the software, and they may be living in the software for quite a while before, like maybe a couple of weeks before any real end customer ends up seeing them.
And your product is both hardware and software, right? You got 2 components, one hardware component and one software component.
Yeah.
How do you keep both development cycles in sync? So you have a new version of hardware, how do you keep the software cycle in sync?
So for the hardware, we initially explored doing some of our own hardware, but we've opted to get OEM hardware. We do have like a network appliance that's got software running on it. It's essentially an industrial PC that can be installed as a data logger in buildings. So we don't design the hardware, it's third-party hardware, but we have written the software that runs on it. It's decoupled from the system that I've been describing. It's essentially using a published and versioned API. So if we do need to change the API, then there is there's a migration path that has to happen. But that's the general approach.
One more question, guys, at a time.
How do you handle planning?
Sorry, how do we handle planning?
Yeah, like I saw you flash up, okay, we do planning on this day, but it looks like, especially if you have items that'll take more than a week, who prepares for that, or how do you deal with that going to the team?
That's a combination of, I don't know exactly, I guess, in the last few weeks. I've moved out of the product management position just in the last few weeks, but we, essentially the product management team will meet with a wider group in the company that includes the customer success and sales and marketing, and they'll determine the longer term product management and product priorities. And the product team will meet on a weekly basis to determine what they're going to do on a shorter term. So the product priorities are set out now, at least around the quarter. What we'll do in the next quarter, and we're trying to go a little further if we can. And then the development team takes that and goes into what's going to happen.
So how do you get estimates on it? You mentioned you were doing estimates. Is that done with the same group?
So at this point, we actually don't do a lot in the way of estimation. So we will do rough estimation of things that are in the roadmap. But for the most part, what we do instead is time box. So like what Steve was talking about, initially, when we were trying to prove out some of the early ideas for the product, there were 3 key feature areas that we wanted to build out. So we allocated a week to build each area, and we wanted to see where we could get to at the end of that week, and then we iterated. And that's the general approach. So I found, like, I used to, when I was working with Eugene, I used to work as an agile consultant. And a big part of what I did was help teams improve their software estimation process. So to produce very lightweight, ideally highly accurate estimates. But what I've found over time is if what you're estimating is sufficiently small, then you can more or less assume the mean, that they're all going to take around about the same amount of time and just do away with estimation. So it's harder to do for things that are in a roadmap because, so those are your ethics or whatever. They might, because they can be quite variable in size. Once you get down to the level of like tactically planning something for a given week, it's either going to fit in the week or it's not. And at that level, I don't need a more granular estimate than that. So we know approximately what our velocity is, so how many issues we can go through a week, and that informs the Kanban limits for the queues in our issue tracking process.
Guys, I really hate to depart the break interrupting our speakers, but we need time to set up a stage for panel, and you may also go for the break. And, see you in 2 minutes.